Coming up on Network Africa. Catholic bishops in Cameroon call for calm after opposition. Issa Chiroma slams President Paul Biya over delayed election results. Madagascar in transition as interim president names new prime minister after the military takeover. Plus, South Africa's online gambling boom hits $4 billion, raising alarms over regulation and addiction. Hello and welcome to today's program. I'm Layo Olange. We begin in Cameroon, where the influential Catholic Church is calling for calm, even as fears grow that violence could erupt once official results from the presidential election are declared. Opposition candidate and former government spokesperson Issa Chiroma has declared himself the winner of the October 12 election, saying he defeated 92-year-old President Paul Biya, who is seeking to extend his 43-year rule by 7 more years. On Monday, Mr. Chiroma issued a strong appeal to the citizens and the international community to defend the results, alleging that shameful and repeated maneuvers are being made to steal the will of the people. He claims large-scale fraud, including ballot box stuffing, fabricated results in the northwest and southwest regions, and the expulsion of election observers from polling stations. He also made a direct appeal to incumbent President Paul Biya, urging him to step down and not tarnish his reputation. Cameroon's Constitutional Council is yet to release the final results. They are expected to be announced on or before October 27, 2025. In Madagascar, the interim head of state, Colonel Michael Randrianirina, has named businessman Henry Salama Rajranarivelo as the island state's new prime minister, and this was in the capital, Antananarivo. He was sworn in during a ceremony at the Ivoloha State Palace and will serve as interim head of state under transitional authority, with a national election expected to be held within the next 2 years. While addressing an assembly, the colonel said the choice was made for several reasons: his competence, experience, and especially his strong connections with international organizations working with the Malagasy nation. He claims strict adherence to the constitution, noting that the selection followed the proposal by members of parliament. Last week, Colonel Randrianirina announced that the armed forces were taking control of his country's government. He also suspended the 2010 constitution. This followed weeks of unrest in the former French colony, fueled by youth-led protests over corruption, unemployment, rising living costs, and recurring power and water shortages. Let's head to Zimbabwe now, where the governing party, ZANU-PF, has said it will begin a process to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years, potentially keeping him in power until 2030. The plan was endorsed on Saturday at the movement's annual conference in the eastern city of Mutare. Justice Minister and ZANU-PF Legal Secretary Ziyambi told delegates that they have been instructed. Delegates have instructed the government, to begin drafting legislation to amend the constitution. 83-year-old President Mnangagwa is constitutionally required to leave office in 2028 after serving 2 elected terms. Any change would require a constitutional amendment and potential referendums. He came into power in 2017 amid promises of democratic and economic reforms following the toppling of longtime President Robert Mugabe. Well, joining us now for more on this story is Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu. He joins us from Harare. Hello, Nigel. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Yes, good evening and pleasure being here.
Well, tell us more about Saturday's ZANU-PF conference. We understand delegates erupted in applause after the motion was passed Is this the same feeling in the public space?
Well, look, to put things into perspective, what really transpired is that you identify as pomp and pan and fanfare is essentially a jamboree. And nothing that should be read much. Yes, it is a political statement that the media and international media in the same magnitude should take cognizance of, but it's nothing outside the express wish of the ruling party and its supporters, and not necessarily something that would take any legal effect outside the existing statutes within the state. And those are the cabinet and the legislature. Nothing of that effect has been put to the table outside of the political statement that has been made, which I think would definitely be opposed, because does not then become just an affront to the ruling party factions, but it then becomes an affront to the constitutionality of Zimbabwe. And that would definitely face resistance, not just from organized opposition political parties, but it will face a resistance from the wider society, because the constitution is what makes Zimbabwe a nation state.
And speaking about the Constitution, the Justice Minister, who's also the Legal Secretary of ZANU-PF, he says delegates have instructed the government to now begin drafting a legislation to amend the Constitution. How is that expected to play out?
Well, essentially, if they are to give effect to the political statement they made, and one fundamental to give context to the audiences is how the ruling party, ZANU-PF, which has not known an elective Congress since 1977, where there will be two contesting leaders, as it were, unlike the case in other political parties or in other spheres. Take, for example, in neighboring South Africa, in ZANU-PF, conferences and congresses are there essentially to buttress the whims and to rubber stamp the mere views of the one that would be in power, or the one that would have state power. Having said that, what is important to note is the resolution they made can actually take effect at law, because they say President Mnangagwa should extend his term to 2030. There is nothing within the Constitution that can provide for an extension of a term that will benefit the incumbent outside either going the route of having to change outrightly the question of term limits, or to change the question of incumbency, which would then require two referendums after having gone through the normal amendment process within the parliament, 90 days, a two-thirds majority. So essentially, it's a political statement which, in terms of the law, would be very hard, if not impossible, to implement.
And President Mnangagwa previously has, insisted he is a constitutionalist with no interest in clinging to power. What has been his response to this decision now by the party?
He has so far not responded to the current resolution as has been outlined at the recently ended national conference of ZANU-PF. The position that he has, which we believe we can give him the benefit of doubt, is that he maintains he's a constitutionalist, and that he will even persuade the people, if they are to persuade him to stay on, that surely he does not want to remain in power. But what is a question, the national question, is that Zimbabwe is confronted with the question of succession. And the question of succession arises and emanates from the constitution that in 2028, President Mnangagwa has to pave way for another leader, whether from the ruling party or outside. And the mechanisms and the political statements that are playing out to either find ways to keep him in power or to find ways to checkmate those within the ruling party that may have the intention of taking over after him, are all but setting the stage for a bruising succession battle, which in this particular case, if it is going to be about pushing a term extension, which becomes an affront to the Constitution, would perhaps end up being messy, as that would, in any event, amount to a bruising battle that would take many fronts, legal fronts, political fronts, and even on the international front. And that is certainly a route we hopefully would not transit into anything that may become disastrous for the country.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu. Thank you for your time on the program.
It was a pleasure being here.
A drone attack has hit an area near the international airport in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, a day before it was set to resume domestic flights for the first time since war broke out in 2023. Well, residents of the city report hearing explosions in several districts early on Tuesday morning. The strike marks the third attack in the capital within a week, following strikes on 2 army bases in northwest Khartoum on consecutive days last week. Now, there's yet to be any information on casualties or damages, and no one has claimed responsibility. On Monday, Sudan Civil Aviation Authority had announced that the airport will reopen on Wednesday, months after the army recaptured Khartoum from the Rapid Support Forces RSF and began repairing the heavily damaged airport. Port Sudan in the east has the country's only functioning international airport, although that also has been targeted by drones. Khartoum has remained relatively calm since the army retook control of the city in March, but attacks have persisted, with the RSF accused of targeting civilian and military infrastructure from a distance. South Africa's online gambling industry has raked in $4 billion in revenue over the past year, a record that's sparking growing concern over regulation, addiction, and the rapid rise of digital betting. Overall, the country's gambling turnover climbed to $80 billion in the 2024-2025 financial year, up from $61 billion the previous year. And it's a worrying trend, says Responsible Gambling Executive Director Sibongile Silame. Well, our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa brings us more details in this report.
A record-breaking boom in online gambling is raising serious concerns about addiction, youth exposure, and weak regulation. I spoke with independent economist and analyst Bonke Dumisa to unpack the economic impact of this growing industry, with South Africa's online gambling sector generating $4 billion in revenue last year. I began by asking him whether this surge represents genuine economic opportunity or if it hides deeper social and productivity costs. Here's what he had to say.
It is not surprising that you've had over 75 billion rands revenue from online gambling.
Professor Dumisa says the growing concern about regulation is a myth.
And I hear that some people say there's less regulations on online gambling. That is a myth. The South African Revenue Services is everything. There's something which is called the Central Monitoring System, which is actually used in gambling to make sure that whatever money goes in there is fully accounted for.
Given the rapid expansion of online betting and the alleged absence of tighter regulation, I asked Professor Dumisa if he believes government is missing out on potential tax revenue and what economic mechanisms could be used to balance growth with consumer protection.
Yes, there must be regulations, but as I say, there are more regulations on gambling than in many other sectors. Let us really monitor what is happening there and support it so long as people who conduct those online gambling processes pay their taxes.
But how do we rehabilitate this challenge? Responsible Gambling Executive Director Sibongile Simelane Kuntana explains.
First thing, you need to admit that you've got a problem. Key to any treatment is acknowledging that you've got a problem. Secondly, you need to have a support structure. The environment also plays a key role. When you've got a family member or families that are supporting and understanding that you are going through some difficulty, it always helps for you to then deal with the problem. We also offer outpatient program where individuals can come in by themselves to seek treatment.
What remains clear is that the balance between profit, protection, and policy will define the future of South Africa's online gambling landscape. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simos, Channels Television News.
We'll take a break now on the program. Still to come. Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo agreed to promote closer ties at the Uganda DRC Business Connect Forum. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, have agreed to promote closer ties through a series of economic and trade commitments unveiled during the Uganda DRC Business Connect Forum in the commercial city of Butembo, North Kivu, DRC. Uganda's ambassador to the country, Kalisa Farid, urged both sides to eliminate non-tariff barriers and harmonize trade standards, calling for clear timelines for upgrading infrastructure and for the strengthening of joint border committees to facilitate smoother trade. But both countries have reaffirmed the political will of their presidents, President Yoweri Museveni and Felix Tshisekedi, to enhance cross-border trade and social development.
Again, eliminate non-tariff barriers hindering our trade, strengthen joint border committees. RDCs are here. You keep your joint border committees. You see, these borders were put in by people who didn't know that the bondage we have as Africans is one. So they want it, they don't want it. The RDC, which so speaks the same as the people on the other side don't. And the RDC in Kasese speaks more the same as far as Butembo. So this issue of strengthening joint border committees is very, very important. Reaffirm our political will to eliminate all non-tariff barriers and promote seamless trade flow. From Uganda side, I know for sure we want to do away with non-tariff barriers. We are also urging our brothers in Congo to do the same so that we harmonize trade and simplify trade for businesses.
Here in Nigeria, the second edition of the Creation Africa Forum has held in Lagos. The event, in collaboration with the French government and a few other private firms in Nigeria and abroad, drew participants from across Africa to the Federal Palace Hotel. Our correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports.
The Creation Africa event, the brainchild of the French government, kicked off in Lagos last week. Although the second time the event is holding worldwide, Lagos was chosen as location for its first edition in Africa. It has become one of the largest gatherings for creators on the continent.
Incredible.
French President Emmanuel Macron addressed the event via video conference.
Choosing Lagos to host the first African edition was an obvious decision. Lagos is not only a creative powerhouse in Africa, but also a global reference for cultural innovation. You've gathered in this vibrant city to explore new perspectives, foster collaboration, and spark creative energy. You are exploring exciting new frontiers in all areas, such as music, TV series, animation, video games, visual effects, comics, digital fashion, etc. But Creation Africa is more than just a forum. It's a powerful opportunity to bring people together across borders, across languages, and to strengthen the ties that unite our creative industries.
Co-founder and executive director, Nollywood Week.
Apart from introducing all of the resource persons who would help make the experience unforgettable, with various classes running simultaneously, so participants gain the full potential of the conference. Day one saw the world premiere of the movie Johansa, the first of its kind African sci-fi saga, created and animated by Paul Louis Julie and co-produced by Joaquim Lando of Sanuwara Studios and Canal Plus International. Paul and Joaquim were at the event to explain the story behind the movie.
The idea was Africa is so diverse as a continent that one corner of it is as different to the other corner as, you know, England is from India. And so many times you'll have the, you know, in Western sensibility, pushing Africa into a monolith. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to show the diversity of Africa, I need to create these images and these cultures that show that you can have all these different futuristic cultures that are each inspired from existing African cultures with no other influence. Like they can stand on their own two legs and you can see how modern they look.
Executive Director Mansa Elizabeth Gomez speaks to us about the importance of the second edition.
For me, as a diaspora kid, I always felt like a void in my journey in life because my parents were born on that continent. I was born over there. And it always has been a struggle for me to connect the two. And being able and having the means to do something like this on the continent really means something. It means something really important to me. So I wanted to create a space where I can connect with my fellows from the continent, where we can thrive together with our project, because I used to be like them. I used to be a director. I launched a magazine. I used to be. I used to work for a dancing company, and it was always difficult for me to find the right door to knock on, to find money, to find collaborators, to find mentorship. And Creation Africa is about this.
By day two, amidst the pop-up Lagos high-end stores, the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot makes a visit.
And we're seeing very large participation of creative talents coming from all over Africa. 1,000 participants coming from 42 countries. 80 of these participant creators are from Nigeria. And I've seen a lot of talent and energy in video games, XR, webtoons, cinema, digital design, etc., etc. And I'm very proud that we have supported and contributed to this success, because France is at the forefront of creative and cultural industries in Europe, when Nigeria is at the forefront of these industries in Africa.
There are prizes to be won and celebrations to be had until the next Creation Forum event. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
And as we end the program today, here's our fun fact about the continent. Did you know that the Goree Island is a small island off the coast of Dakar, Senegal, most famously known as a major center for the Atlantic slave trade, with a preserved house of slaves as a historical monument. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a popular tourist destination, reflecting on the brutal history of the transatlantic slave trade and the human rights violations of the past. From the 15th to the 19th century, it was a major hub for the slave trade. And the House of Slaves, built between 1780 to 1784, is a famous memorial. In 1978, the island was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site to commemorate the African slave trade and the human rights violations that happened there. And that's it on the program for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.